I said, confidence is such a massive subject. And I was looking at some statistics before, with 70% of people admitting that they lack confidence in work, survey conducted back in 2019, and even more so through the pandemic, and people having been furloughed, being made redundant, and really impacting confidence. And Vodafone have released a white paper saying that over a third of people returning to the workplace felt a loss of confidence. And it's just a massive topic. And I wanted to really talk about it during this meetup, but I didn't want to share my opinions because I do talk a lot around the subject, and I really wanted to get an insight from people on their own individual journeys. So I run an organisation called the Confidence Community, and as part of that community, we run a programme called the Confidence Collective. So this is aimed at people, women in particular, that are wanting to progress their journeys into tech leadership, and wanting to look at building and developing skills in areas such as self-awareness, confidence and imposter syndrome, personal brand, and also leadership. So since 2018, we have taken over 70 women through the programme and had some massive achievements, ranging from doing TED Talks to gaining promotions, winning awards, but most importantly, for feeling more confident in terms of what their own journey is and what that looks like for them. So we have a programme running at the moment, and I'm delighted that all of our speakers this evening are on that programme, which is absolutely amazing. So I want to obviously position that they are finishing their programme actually tomorrow, so our last session is tomorrow. Majority of them haven't spoken in their public forum before. So not only is that in terms of building their confidence, but they're also sharing their confidence journeys in areas such as negative self-talk, imposter syndrome, resilience, returning to work, and many more areas. So I'm hopefully that you're going to find this really useful, with some takeaways, and really hopefully relate to some of the stories that the ladies will share. There will be 3 lightning talks and also a panel discussion. So if you do have any questions, there will be an opportunity after each talk and after the panel to ask those. So you can come on to camera and ask them verbally, or if you just want to pop them on the chat, I will make sure that I get round to them. So just in terms of from an agenda perspective, we have our first lightning talk by Louise Chu at AO. Then we have another lightning talk by Katie White from AO. Then we have a panel discussion, which I will facilitate, and that's with Cheryl, Lindsay, Cass, and Laura. And then we have our final lightning talk with Zoe. And there's an opportunity at the end if anyone has any other further questions. So without further ado, I am going to ask Louise to come on to unmute herself.
I have unmuted.
Brilliant. Have you got any slides, Louise? Or
I do. So let's see how this goes, eh?
So you can share your screen and I'll pass over to you. Like I said, if you've got any questions, you can leave them to after the talk, and you can either ask them publicly or you can pop them in the chat, please.
So can you see a nice screen that says negative self-talk?
Yeah, brilliant. Sorry, before you start, Louise, if everyone can just make sure that they're on the mute, just in case we have any background noise, family, kids, etc., that would be great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this might not be quite as polished as we hoped, and we just had this trouble getting on. It's okay, it's fine. You gave me something else to think about. So I volunteered, or was it maybe peer pressure, to come and do this talk, knowing that it was on confidence and my experience of it. So I started to think about what confidence means to me. So to me, it's about being able to go and do something that you might not think you know everything you need to, but it's going doing it anyway. It isn't not being afraid, because if it was that, then I wouldn't be here, because I am. It isn't And it isn't doing something without thinking about the consequences either, because I have a habit of just agreeing to do things without really considering how difficult it might be. But that's not confidence. I think that's just laziness. It's something. I think it's something in you that says you can do this. You know it won't be perfect, but you'll go and do it anyway. And it's about having faith that you know what you're talking about and sticking to your guns and not doing that. So I thought about what affects my confidence, and I think something that really knocks my confidence is negative self-talk. So that is the voice in your head that talks to you during the day and tells you what's going well, or in this case, what isn't actually going well. It sounds like it isn't on your side, but actually it's your brain's way of trying to protect you. It knows you're feeling a bit apprehensive about something. It's your brain's way of saying, don't go and do this because you're worried. So why are you worried? So you hear it more in some instances than others, and you could just ignore it. Or you could listen to it and then not put yourself in tricky situations and just stay in your comfort zone all the time. But if you're wanting to improve yourself and push yourself and do your job well, then that isn't the way to be. So I thought I'd talk a bit about what my voice says. So I've spent a bit of time like trying to consciously notice what it says. So mine says to me, God, I should have thought of that. I can't believe you didn't think of that. Why are they the ones thinking of that? You're so stupid. And then maybe it'll say to me, everyone else here is just wondering why on earth you're here. What value are you adding? Maybe they'd be relieved if you left. Maybe they wouldn't even notice. And then sometimes it just stops giving specific criticism. It just like goes all out. But doesn't do it all the time, thankfully. Otherwise I'd be a gibbering wreck. And I say that I'll be a gibbering wreck under my desk. And it's funny how I say desk, because I do tend to notice it more in work situations. So like it doesn't come and get me when I'm walking around the supermarket, for example. But then when I think about it, maybe it does come and talk to me in social situations as well, but I've not really explored this. So this is really what I've thought about from a work perspective. So now I know that my brain is trying to sabotage. Well, what do I do next? Do I just live with it? So I thought maybe the first thing to realize is that these are just thoughts. They're not facts. Just because you think it doesn't actually make it true. We also have a nice acronym of ICE to help us. It's a process we can go through to dampen down any thoughts or the effects of the thoughts. So we can identify the voice, what's it saying, when is it saying it, so a bit like I've done. And then you can confront it. So when I have my example of, I should have thought of that, and that will be right sometimes, but what about all the other times that I did think of something? And then finally we eliminate. So elimination is probably a bit optimistic. It's not going to go away forever and be quiet all the time, but you can make it quieter and speak up less often. So one way to do this is to get some evidence. So get that when you get feedback or when you've done something that you're proud of, save those examples and look back at them. So I went and did a bit of research online to see what else we could do. One of them is give the voice a name. So this is Beryl. This is my voice. And I've decided that anyone who wears a house coat and crochets antimacassars is not someone you should listen to very often. I might be taking this advice slightly too far by giving her a hobby, but you know, whatever works. This one is a bit wishy-washy, but stick with it. When you hear the voice, recognize it for what it is. It's a thought. It's not a fact. It's not an opinion from another person, even though you might think it is. It's just your brain thinking it's doing you a favor and trying to protect you. Something else you can do is treat yourself like you treat a friend. When you hear that voice, you think, is that what you'd say to a friend if they were in this situation? And the correct answer is definitely not yes if they were being as stupid as me, because you wouldn't. So when this voice talks to you, talk back. What would you say to your friend? Give yourself that pep talk. Thought stopping. To be honest, this one is not for me, but it might be for you. It's a 3-step method. So firstly, when you spot the thought, yell stop in your mind, not out loud. Secondly, take 3 big, deep abdominal breaths And then thirdly, imagine a quiet, calm, beautiful image as the focal point. I thought about this and I couldn't imagine doing it in the middle of a meeting, for example. So I've not tried. So you could replace with a positive affirmation. So these should be personal to you. They should reflect your personality and your achievements. I thought about giving you an example, but actually the thought of doing this for myself makes me squirm a little bit. So I've not done it, so I can't. But the idea is you've got your positive affirmation, and then when your negative voice returns, you can attack it with your positive affirmation. Or another thing that's a bit similar is when you hear the negative, add a positive onto the end. So instead of just hearing, I should have thought of that, you can hear, I should have thought of that. I did make that other contribution earlier, which was also useful. And that's where your evidence comes in useful as well from earlier. Another thing you can do is train your brain. So this takes a bit more time. It's not something you can do on the spot, but you can train your brain to be more positive. So you could do a morning visualization exercise. So you visualize what your day will look like when you're at your best. And then at the end of the day, ask yourself what you did during the day to achieve that visualization. Don't go over what went wrong. Instead, write down what went well. So even if this was really small, just write it down. Do this every day or every few days. You've got evidence to go back to. It becomes a ritual and your brain becomes more used to being positive. And then this next one is my own final personal piece of advice. So it's not backed up by research or a website or come from anybody else, but I've installed a teenager in my head. So this could backfire quite badly, but at the minute it's working. So when Beryl says something mean, he can come back with an eye roll and a whatever, yeah, and it shuts her up. So I've just got to make sure he doesn't take over my brain, because that would be quite nasty. But hopefully some of that will be useful, and I know not all of it will be, but there might be one. If there's one thing someone can take from it, then it's been worthwhile. So thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you, Louise. We'll do a virtual clap. Thank you so much. That was so insightful. I was actually talking about negative self-talk earlier on today, saying that when you actually say negative self-talk, people say, oh, well, what's that? And then when you start to say, oh, it's those like voices in my head that say, well, I can't do that, or, you know, who do you think you are? Or, you know, you don't look great today. And then people go, so you get that voice as well. And I think it's when people start to talk about it and acknowledge it, you actually go, yeah, we all do experience it. And it's not about like, you know, it'd be great to extinguish it, but being realistic, we're not. It's in terms of how to manage it and control it. And that's some great advice there, Louise, about how to do that. Has anyone got a question for Louise, either whether they, oh yes, Jennifer, do you want to unmute yourself?
Absolutely. First off, Louise, I just wanted to comment how smooth and candid your presentation was. And I really like the teenager suggestion. Besides that, though, I found that the new courage, if you will, is vulnerability. And so I was wondering what your thoughts on that was.
Well, as you could see, I was quite candid there, and I don't have a problem with admitting when I'm struggling with something. So today we was talking about delegation with some people, and quite happily admitted that I struggle with delegation because I see it as a weakness. I'm admitting I can't do something if I've delegated it, which is completely wrong. So I think opening yourself up to people helps them trust you, and building those relationships, which can only be a good thing.
Absolutely agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else got a question for Louise? Got some great comments on there, Louise. A lady called Rebecca and said that talked about she's got gremlins in her head at the moment because she's starting a new job and it's telling her them fraud. So hopefully, Rebecca, the tips that Louise has shared this evening will really help you in that. I hope you can make use of them and put them into practice. That'd be brilliant. Thank you. Oh, and she said it has. So Louise, make sure you read those comments. And yeah, obviously our community is all really about supporting each other. So as I said, you can pop in the chat if you've got any feedback, any comments. It's just obviously recognizing people that are, for the first time speaking out about such a vulnerable topic, as Jennifer mentioned, and it'd just be great to obviously recognize that and give them some praise and recognition in the chat, which is absolutely amazing. Thank you. So without further ado, we're going to move on to our second lightning talk, Katie. So Katie, if you can pop your mic on and you can share your screen, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Can you see it now?
No.
No.
You did it before.
You're only doing this so you make other people feel comfortable and confident. Don't worry about it. You're taking me to see.
There you are.
Bill, can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it now.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so my talk's about why you should stop looking for a fix for imposter syndrome. So I'm going to start off with some bad news. So the reason for this is that there is no fix. And I know this because I've spent hours and hours and hours trawling through the internet trying to find one. However, I do have some good news because I found some ways that have helped me that I'm hoping I can share with you. So first of all, I just wanted to touch on what imposter syndrome is. So it kind of encompasses in everything on the right. It's a feeling of being a fraud. It might be that you feel like you got to where you are through luck. It could be that voice in your head, as Louise has just said, that you're going to get found out. And the bottom one, so you might think that you're not good enough, but in there I've put in brackets incorrectly, because 99.9% of the time that thinking is wrong and you're exactly where you should be. So we estimate that about 70% of people have felt like this at some point in their lives, but really we believe this to be higher. And the reason for that is because some people might not want to admit it, but also some people don't recognise that what they've been feeling is imposter syndrome until you start talking about it. So for me, imposter syndrome is something that I've felt and suffered, because I claim to suffer from it because I hate it. It's something with for years, and as recent as Friday I was sat crying at my dining table whilst I was trying to write this talk, having a massive breakdown because I was like, I'm not a speaker, they're going to find out, who am I to talk about this? But what I want to talk about today is where in the past 18 months it's become more of an issue and come more to a head. So just before lockdown last year, I changed careers and I moved into tech. I'd done 12 months of mentoring and I went into the interview, and at that point, failing that interview was not an option for me. I did loads of work and I was going to get the job. There was no possibility. So I went in the interview and I remember sitting there and you had to do a task. And as a result of doing the 12 months of mentoring, and I'd kind of made a nuisance of myself in the department to network and learn as much as I could. I was really keen on telling the interviewers that I'd completed the task by myself, and that was something that was really important to me. Anyway, I did get the job, so I'm really happy that I'm now a BA. But that's kind of where my issues started. So as I got the job, I got really positive feedback. The one thing that would play on my mind for probably the next 6-9 months was the fact that I didn't start at a junior level. I went in kind of at a professional level, and I just didn't understand how, yes, I'd done the mentoring, but I'd never done the work before. I'd never been a BA. I'd never worked in tech. I never had anything around the job title. So how could they say that I can do the job and I wasn't a junior? In addition to that, I went onto a team that I already knew the domain. So this again was a bit strange for me. So on the Friday, I would have been the person kind of telling the other BAs what the problems were and what issues we need to consider. And then I was coming back in on the Monday, and I was now supposed to go and find them problems and speak to other people when I knew kind of all the answers myself. So yeah, I was a little bit lost. As well as on this, we were then getting results. So we was doing everything that we needed to do as a team, but I just couldn't help convincing myself that if I was on another team, then we wouldn't be doing as well, and it was just luck for where I was. Following on from this, I remember getting a piece of feedback and being told, Katie White, you just get it. You just get it. And I was like, this isn't right. I've fooled them. They must be wrong. How can I get it when apparently other people that have been doing it for longer or had more experience didn't get it? And them thoughts of is wrong, it just they really got to me a little bit. And it weren't just the thoughts that would affect me. So most weeks within the first 6 months, I'd be crying. I'd make workshops and meetings into a big deal. This is probably where lockdown maybe worked in my favour, because it meant I could just turn my camera off and mute myself. But I'd constantly be ringing managers for reassurance, be full of self-doubt. And looking back, I think subconsciously I was trying to prove my managers wrong and tell them that I should be at a junior level. But it really manifested in every area of my work. I remember going to a talk about imposter syndrome, and I really thought that talk was going to give me all the answers. And I remember being a bit disappointed because the one key takeaway was treat imposter syndrome as a positive because it means you're outside your comfort zone. Now, while that's valid, at that time, that's not what I wanted. I wanted someone to come and take away them feelings and not tell me that if I wanted to be successful and ambitious, I had to feel like this. So this is kind of where then my incessant Googling started. So I was convinced that out there somewhere there was a cure for imposter syndrome, and it was just hidden in a deep hole on the internet. And it was just waiting to be uncovered. And so I was going to be the person that would go and find it and then share it with the world and basically save everyone. And one of the things that always comes up is around acknowledgement. And again, this is something that I think can help. So it's this acknowledgement of your feelings and what it is and being able to put a name to it. Where I already knew about imposter syndrome from being told about it a few years ago. I knew that what I was suffering from, what I was feeling was imposter syndrome, but I wanted more than just being able to put the label on. I was very much at a point of, right, that's what it is. How do I deal with it? And so I wanted to share some of the things that I've then found that have helped me, because upon reflecting around this and talking about imposter syndrome with a few other people and doing it as part of the Confidence Collective, this is where I found that it can get easier and it doesn't necessarily go away. And the reason it probably doesn't go away is because the person in the talk who was saying it's about your comfort, being outside your comfort zone, was right in what they were saying. One of the things that I tried at the time was put in screenshots like this. I'd search on Pinterest to find motivational quotes and put them as my backdrop on my phone. This is one that I thought was really nice at the time. So you're busy doubting yourself while so many people are intimidated by your potential. Other ways that I feel tangible ways that have helped to reduce my imposter syndrome are keeping a log of positive feedback. So we often hear about put your positive feedback in a file on your emails. And I've done that in the past, but what I always found was that it would go in there and I might dig through it when it was appraisal time. This time I created a PDP, so a personal development board on Trello, and I've bookmarked that. So every day when I go into Trello to use like the team Kanban boards, etc., it's my personal development board that I see. And when I open that up, it's that long list of positive feedback that I see. So even without having to read what people have said over the year, that's built up, and every day I've got that visual cue of, well, people are saying I must be doing okay, so they can't all be wrong. I started doing mini retros on myself. So at the beginning I did these every week, but as with everything, they kind of slip. Sometimes it can go a month without doing them. But I'll just take that 5-10 minutes once a week, or a couple of times a week, or a month, whenever it is, to reflect back on what's gone well and what's not gone well. And again, I do this on that Trello board. And what I've noticed recently is that my what's going well column is getting a lot longer than my what's not going well. And it's also really nice to look back at like this time last year and some of the things that I was putting that haven't gone well and how much I've grown since, and remember how far I've gone, because I don't feel that rubbish anymore. Another big one for me was around validation. So going back to the point of how can I do this job when I've never done it before? I'm someone that needs like that piece of paper to say, you've done it, now go out and do it. And doing the Scrum Master qualification in September really did that. So I went along, and someone that was qualified because they had the name was telling me things that I already knew. But then at the end of it, I've got that certificate to say, yeah, you're a qualified Scrum Master. And it was someone else kind of validating what I knew was right. Changing up your environment. So this around for me is that when I changed teams, my imposter syndrome reduced quite a lot. And I think being in the domain that I was at the beginning, I was probably a little bit too much in my comfort zone, which I know is a bit contradictory, but I was a bit too comfortable, and I don't think I realised how much I knew. And when I changed teams, completely new, different area of the business, know nothing, but it was able for me to put into practice what I knew, and it was a bit like, oh, actually, I have learned stuff and I do know my stuff and I'm making valuable change. And the last one was just revisiting the research. So this probably links into that acknowledgement piece of knowing more about it. So there was a really nice blog that I don't know if anyone else follows him. It's called The Samurai Business Analyst. He sent one out today around knowledge is kind of like power, and it all links back into that. The more you know about something, the less it is to be like scared of or anxious of. And for me, like going back into it and looking at the different types of imposter syndrome, there's one that's called the natural genius, which sounds a bit funny when you're talking about imposter syndrome, because your first initial thought is, well, I'm not a genius. But when I was looking at that now applies to me, I think, when I was getting told you just get it, because I couldn't understand how I could just get it and other people didn't. And I think it's just that understanding of how different things play out a little bit. So hopefully I've like prevented anyone from going into that internet black hole like I did, and giving you some tangible ways that might make them feelings a little bit more comfortable. I have also written like a little blog post around this, because when I started doing, did anyone share then?
No.
Yeah.
Like I clicked something and you all disappeared. Because when I started writing my talk on Friday, it kind of just grew and grew. So I'll post that in the chat because it just goes into it in a little bit more detail. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, your claps are coming through. You can do the claps on the reactions. If not, you're not used to Zoom, you've got reaction button on the menu bar, and you can do virtual claps. Yes, they're all coming through now, Katie. Brilliant. If you yeah, Jason, brilliant. Thank you. That was amazing. and definitely you did different to what you've heard before in terms of actually sharing that practical advice, and again, really just relevant resources, tips, feedback which you can actually put into practice. Has anyone got any questions that they would like to ask Katie? Back to you, Jennifer.
Yeah, you know me on the questions.
Okay.
No, Katie, the visuals and the graphics in your presentation were great. I loved them. And I also thought that you came off as very personable when doing your presentation. My question for you was, as anybody here, suffering from imposter syndrome, and this is going back to the slide that you shared with the quote about, somebody else might be intimidated by your presence. So if you're receiving some feedback from somebody that's not so positive, but that you also suspect is intimidated by your presence, how would you deal with that situation?
If I'm honest, I'd probably go and hide and have a bit of a crisis. But then I think it's looking at taking it on board a little bit and understanding where they're coming from. Depending how they're giving me the feedback, I'd probably try and talk to them about it, because I think sometimes you can lose so much in so much context when it could be just be like written feedback. And I think, understanding potentially how valid that feedback is.
Because that could be really hard to judge when you're, already doubting yourself. So
yeah, I'd probably check it out with my manager as well, to be fair. As much as I try not to, I still probably very much have her on speed dial. Either that or Louise. And be like, I've had this, how true do you think it is? Yeah.
No, that's a
I'd
great
like
answer.
to think that I wouldn't necessarily take it to heart, but I would.
It's hard. I know it's hard. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jennifer. You've got some great feedback in the chat, Katie, that you can have a look on once you finish. But people loving the Trello idea and the personal development. I've not actually heard of that before. I've heard of the putting it in an email and a filing system, but keeping it on Trello is a great idea. So you've really inspired, I think, quite a lot of people to take some course of action. Anyone got any questions before we move on? No, that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Katie, and thank you again, Louise, for our 2 lightning talks. We're now going to move on to our panel. So if I can invite our panelists to unmute themselves, that would be great. So we have Cheryl, Cass, Lindsay and Laura on our panel this evening, talking all about confidence. Before we dive straight into the questions, could I ask you ladies just to introduce yourselves? Cheryl, I'll start with yourself.
Yeah. Hi everyone, lovely to be here tonight. I'm Cheryl. I am a people and recruitment specialist at ANS Group, a cloud and digital business, so in the tech industry. And I've been part of the Confidence Collective for the last 4 months now, and super nervous at talking on this, but I think the confidence journey that I'm on needs things like this to happen to improve on it and to build on it. So super happy to be chatting tonight, and great talks from Louise and Katie as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cheryl. Cass?
Hi, I'm Cass Whittingham, and I'm a business analyst at AO. I work in the, I can't even speak now, it's all coming out. I work in the logistics area, so dealing with some of the driver apps and the track your order systems. And I've worked in that area a little bit before, but on the other side of it, so we were supplying the system. So it's nice to get back into getting a bit more customer contact and working on that area. And same with Cheryl, really been on the confidence course for the last 4 months. So this is really good to get involved in this and hope we can do more of this.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks, Cass. Lindsay?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsay Bolton, and I'm a business analyst, very similar to Cass, for AO.com. And I work within the logistics part of the business as well, so supporting the warehouse operations side of the business. Really exciting. I get to wear a high vis and everything. It's so good. Feel very privileged to be here tonight and speaking, being a speaker as well. So I've joined seminars before, very similar, but actively like looking up at people and felt very inspired. So having this opportunity is great. And yes, I'm 4 months into the Confidence Collective, and I'm looking forward to how we'll continue our journey together as well as a cohort. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant, thanks Lindsay. And Laura.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura. I'm a project manager at AO. I work really closely with Cass and Lindsay and Katie in logistics as well. So my team's logistics tech, so everything's to do with the warehouse to integrating new businesses into AO within logistics. Like the other girls, been on the course for 4 months now, and it has done me the world of good. And yeah, very nervous about being on this panel. It's definitely out of my comfort zone. I don't do things like this ever. So yeah, be kind. And yeah, I think that's everything about me.
Brilliant, fantastic, thank you. And it's talking about a topic that's all close to your heart, so it will become very much more natural. I think introducing yourself is always the hardest part. So Cheryl, I'm going to start with yourself. So Katie's just been talking all about imposter syndrome. And whilst it's considered to be pretty well known, it's also different for everyone in terms of how it manifests itself. And I was only talking about this actually earlier on today about even the word, about that term imposter syndrome. Not many people actually understand that thoughts and feelings is actually termed under that brand name. So what was your understanding of imposter syndrome to begin with?
Yeah, no, totally. And listening to Katie's talk there, and you know, finding more out about imposter syndrome, it's a very real thing. I think pinnacle moment for me from when I first found out what it was. I remember where I was sat, how I felt, and it was actually sort of like a wow moment. It was at one of the meetup events of the WIT North in 2019 to be precise, and there was a talk on imposter syndrome. I'd never heard of it before, didn't know what it was, and all the collective feelings was you know, discussed in there about being fraud, don't deserve to be where I am, I'll get caught out someday. I was like, wow, this is me. I've been feeling like this for 5-6 years of my career, and probably even before that, and never really been able to pinpoint what it was. And I think that bit there was the biggest bit for me, is just being able to actually call it a thing and say, you know, that I don't know, those feelings that I've always been feeling are actually identified as something. So that was, you know, a good few years ago. And from that, really, it's helped me understand me, you know, to try and build on me. You know, thought actually I need to get to know a bit more about this, like Kate was saying, as to how does it affect me personally, and sort of really actually get to understand that it's about the thoughts and feelings and how you can actually do something with it. I do have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it now, I think, in terms of like the actual term. You know, it's a medical condition, it's a bit of a label, it can be perceived quite negative, but I think it's part of your makeup, it's part of your personality, it's just a natural way of feeling sometimes. You know, we all get those sort of low confident moments, so I think it's just how you approach them and control those thoughts. So I think it's from finding out to finding out more about it, and even now it's a journey, and it's a continuous journey, and I don't think it'll ever go, but it's sort of capturing it and making sure I work with it.
Yeah, it's very much like that, isn't it? It's that love-hate relationship with it. Yeah. Because I always talk about it, and a bit more what Katie said. I was that person in the conference saying, yeah, but you know when you experience it, you're going into that growth zone, so it's actually a good thing. So yeah, I'll have to make sure, Katie, that I always follow that up with advice as well when I'm talking about it. So I've learned something today as well. But in terms of, obviously, like you said, around people, you know, feeling it in different situations, just moving on to you, Cass, obviously, in terms of what would you say those typical characteristics that you feel that you know that you're going into that sort of imposter syndrome zone?
Definitely when I look around a room and look at everybody in that room and knowing that, not knowing, but in my head knowing that they are way up there and I'm just not, and why would I be there, and what have I got to offer for that, whatever topic is there. And it's really different. I mean, I didn't really have imposter syndrome until I moved into the world of IT, and that's when I really realised I'm looking in a room full of people and I know nothing and they know everything. In reality, our skill sets were just a little bit different. What I could offer them was something that they didn't have, and it was a different way of sort of looking at things. And it still comes on a bit of a daily panic, really. Everybody knows a little bit more than I do, but it's what you do with that and how you sort of go forward with it that's the difference.
That's really interesting what you shared then, Cass, and maybe quite relevant to people in our community about feeling it when they're entering technology. Would you just expand on that? Why do you think that was? And what industry were you in before? And obviously, as you transition to tech, and why, from you reflecting it back now, why do you think that came more apparent?
For me, I'd worked in customer services for so long in the bank. I was working for the Halifax at the time, and they'd just opened up a trainee IT school centre. So I applied just because one of my colleagues was looking for a job. They didn't want to apply, and I'm like, oh, I'll do that then, as a joke, really, just to see what happened. And boom, I got a job. And I was put as a trainee developer in a room full of IT graduates. So I've never been to university. I've studied different diplomas in different things, but never into an IT world. So it was definitely a challenge to a comfort zone and a challenge of what on earth. These guys already do have a bit of that background, and I really don't. But also there was something there.
Yeah, and it's a bit about what Katie said in a presentation about that validation. You're looking for that certificate, and if those people had more, you perceive them to have more knowledge in you, obviously then can really trigger those sort of thoughts and feelings of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, there was definitely that. I mean, as we went on through our training, let's just say it definitely wasn't me that set an infinite loop off in the coding and slowed the system down for 3 days. No, more of a spark on my side than somebody else's there. So.
And this is a matter of interest, Cass. Do you still feel that now? How long have you been within your role, and do you still have those feelings?
So I've been a business analyst for about 13, just over 13, nearly 14 years, and been in IT 15, I guess. I still feel it now. Definitely, especially when you move jobs. I think it's somebody else mentioned it before. They've just moved into another role, and you're going into that situation. You've come from somewhere where you really are at the top. You got all your knowledge, and then you go somewhere else and you're learning new domain knowledge, and it kind of challenges everything. Not just about the domain, but it does challenge, like, do I actually know how to get these requirements? Do I know how to speak to people? And it goes back to that level of basic with me. Can I go out there and do that and pitch at the right level and instill the confidence? And if I don't feel confident in myself, how do I get that back? It's good though. We do it.
You do it, and you've done it for so long, and you've progressed, and and you're now here talking about it. So that's all that journey of progressing and going forward, which is absolutely amazing. And touching upon, obviously, you talked about confidence there. And something, obviously, people who know me, I'm extremely passionate about, obviously, people returning to, work situations. Obviously, being co-founder and CEO of an organisation called Tech Returners, we support people transitioning back into tech after a career break. And I know, Lindsay, it's a topic very close to your heart. And you've been on maternity leave, and you returned to work, and you really wanted to talk a bit about those challenges and how that made you feel, because it can be very, very relevant, as I said in the introduction, about people returning after furlough, career breaks, redundancy, a lot of situations which might be relevant to a lot of people out there. So would you mind sharing a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so kind of just to set up the scene a little bit, really. I'm very fortunate to enjoy my role, my BA role. As I say, I work within the logistics arm of AO. It's very exciting. And at the point I was about to leave, to start my maternity leave, we went live with a really successful project. I think I skipped out of the warehouse on the last day. So I had a very positive, lasting impression to kind of hold on to during my maternity leave, which was a great feeling, and feel privileged to have that. So when it was time to return, a huge part of me was excited. I craved that old routine that I had, that professional part of me was back. I started to wonder what was next for me at AO. But I also started to think about, will I just fit back in and will it feel the same? And that anxiety inside me just started to bubble then as a result. And I had 9 months off in the end, so that was kind of my break. I'd say within my first few weeks, I naturally slipped into more of a listening, more submissive role. So it was quite unusual for me because I've always been quite an active player, someone that would drive conversations and actively challenge. But I always thought someone else, the people around me knew more. So I focused on what I didn't know rather than what I did. And that I would say that anxiety just grew then. And I started to kind of wanted to evaluate my purpose in the team, and that feeling of self-doubt just got quite overwhelming. I'd say, like, for example, in meetings, just relating to what Louise was saying earlier around negative self-talk, I'd hear myself saying, I should know the answer to that question. Why didn't I think of it? That's so obvious, Lindsay. What's wrong with you? People are going to see this weakness. And it just wasn't the Lindsay I remember being.
Did you notice that at the time, Lindsay, or was it more when you got back to work?
It was more when I was at work. So again, because I left on such a high, I felt like I had that energy, that drive to meet my team. I love being part of the team that I'm in, and I had the luxury of going back to that team. So I had no uncertainty as such. I think it was just the reality had struck that my brain wasn't used to thinking in that same way anymore. And that, as a result, it was that spiral of, I don't think I know how to do this job anymore. So yeah, I think it was more around when I actually got into work, my confidence lowered.
Yeah, I remember when I first went on my first career break and to have my son, and I didn't, at the time, I just didn't think anything about it until I got back into work, and I thought, wow, this has really affected me in terms of my confidence. And I probably underestimated the impact. And I think more and more it's like, events like this, there's a lot more people speaking about it that you can really understand in terms of to acknowledge it, and it is normal. Because sometimes I thought, oh God, am I the only person that's feeling like this? Or, is this normal to feel like this after you've had a period of time off? So, it's great, people like yourself are sharing stories around it and obviously normalizing it as well, a bit around the whole like imposter syndrome, negative self-talk, etc. Laura, you've had a similar experience to Lindsay in terms of having maternity leave and having a career break. And we all know that, when you have children, it's a huge step, and it sort of makes you look and reassess things in your personal life and also in your career. What did you sort of learn through that process, and what did you discover about your own values and decisions that you were making on your return to work?
Yeah, I feel like I really started to think about myself a lot more than I did before. So in terms of actually, I've now got these little people that need to come first, and I've got to think about like, how do I do the best by them? So that made me really step back and go, actually, I think I need to really rediscover kind of my purpose in my role. And like I said, you do it more when you have kids because you feel like you're doing it for them, like they're your sort of like the reason why you're getting up and doing it, why you're earning your money, so that you can give them the nice things if you can. So yeah, I think I'm not a very spontaneous person. I like to plan everything, and I like to make sure that I've got everything kind of in my control, and that's what gives me my confidence. So I realised that values were good and they would help me with that, because obviously it's important to have them as something to follow. So one thing that I kind of learn is that having values, or kind of like where they come from, that comes from within. So a value is something that makes you kind of have a buzz and feel happy and maybe feel proud of something you do. So yeah, for me, I had to take a bit of a step back and actually have some key values that gave me some control and a bit of confidence in what I was doing.
Brilliant. And sorry to put you on the spot, Laura, but would you mind sharing maybe one of your values that you've sort of identified and what impact that's had, you know, in terms of confidence and your journey going forward?
Yeah, so one of mine is being courageous. So people who work with me will laugh at this because I think I'm saying a lot at the minute, but I read recently, if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. And this has really stuck with me. Like, you've got to push yourself out of your comfort zone and be a bit brave and be a bit courageous, because that's the only way you're going to change and grow. So yeah, I think that would probably be mine, my main one. Yeah, be a bit more courageous.
Brilliant, fantastic, thank you. And that nicely sort of links around that area of change. And coming back to you, Cheryl, you obviously identified imposter syndrome. And now obviously you're battling in terms of it, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. What practical steps, a bit like what Katie shared, and what's worked for you in terms of reframing in those sort of feelings of you know, being a fraud, etc., that you might potentially feel when you're having that moment of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I honestly think for me it's just purely changing the way you think about it, and you know, the feeling that I often feel is out of my depth. I'm in tech, but not a techie. You know, there's a lot of tech lingo going around, and I don't know, you know, half of it, probably even less than that. So it's about, you know, okay, yeah, I'm out of my depth, but actually looking at how much do I need to know, how much, you know, do I need to know, and do I actually know it for what I need to know it for? Am I telling myself I'm out of my depth too much to sort of stifle me? So it's kind of just believing and almost changing the way I'm thinking, I think is what I've done really in terms of, you know, taking steps to move from it. Also just realizing, I know we talked a lot about it today, and you know, recognizing, I mean, in the Confidence Collective, how many people in the first session, you know, said that they related to it. Knowing you're not alone, I think, is such a comfort. You know, it really is. You know, the most successful people suffer from it. So actually, I am normal, and reframing that again, and the thoughts that I'm feeling. I also like to sit in meetings sometimes and actually think to myself, well, I'm feeling unconfident maybe, and I'm guessing probably half, maybe if more people are feeling the same. So really sort of telling myself again, speaking to myself, and maybe doing that talk, you know, that self-talk around actually other people in this room are probably faking it before they make it too. So just really kind of putting that through, asking myself questions like, I often say, why are they asking me? Why me on a project? Why am I sat in this meeting? Actually ask myself why I'm asking myself that, and I actually get a silly response from it, and I'm like, or an unvalid one, you know, it's like, actually no, there's no reason why I shouldn't be there. And then I think the other thing, again, sticking with the thoughts around it, is just embracing it. It won't go, it won't disappear. You know, some of the characteristics of imposter syndrome are actually positives. You know, we want to be overachieving. We'll actually turn it into something that makes you do that. So it's kind of a transform thoughts, take them as an opportunity, and grow with it. I think that's the biggest thing. And although that sounds sometimes, when you're speaking about it from, you know, my perspective, could seem a bit fluffy, I genuinely think the thought changing is where it comes from.
No, that's brilliant. Got brilliant advice, Cheryl. Like you've you've shared so much in just that answer alone that I think a lot of people will relate to. So that's why I've asked you to come on this thing, because you have got a lot to share. And yeah, it's great to obviously ask that, a bit like, again, what we heard earlier about asking yourself, now, would you say that, or would you ask that same question? Because you usually find out, no, I would never ever say, you know, one of the exercises we do in the program is, would you say that to that other person? Because, you know, 10 out of 10 times you wouldn't. So why are you saying it to yourself? So great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cass, have you got anything to add in terms of how you're dealing with imposter syndrome, or things that, you know, you might have tried, have worked, things that might have evolved that you would like to share with the community?
I consciously moved sectors as part of the challenge to myself. Being in the banking sector for so long, in different roles, you hit that comfort zone, but you don't push yourself beyond a little boundary either. So it was a really conscious decision of, I need to come out of this area and see what my skills can do. So that was it's not something for everybody, but if you can do something like that, that's really good. Moving around in different sectors, so I did move around quite a lot of different places then, to challenge myself, as well as sort of move around in the career-wise. Pushing myself really into contracting, because I've got to the point where, right, okay, my skills can be moved between different sectors, so I can do the banking, I can do tourism, I can do X, Y, Z, but what about if I just go hit the ground running somewhere? So when I got the opportunity to do that, I didn't, just for once, I didn't hesitate. I got stuck in and did that. Coming back into the world of permanent employment, I feel like I've just become a lot more honest as well. I think as well, though, working where I am now within AO, we are such a really honest community as well, really supportive of each other. So it's a lot easier to be able to talk about it. But I think that was probably be my key thing, is just put yourself out there and say, this is how I'm feeling, because if you're in the right place, you'll get that level of support. And knowing that there's communities such as this one, the Women Confidence Collective, Women in Tech, we all do band together to help and sort of push people along, and what's the correct way? Not push people along, support each other in general.
So, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you really touched on a really important topic there, that, you know, listening to a podcast around, you know, is it actually confidence or is it resilience? You know, the more and more things we put, like you said, you put yourself into different situations to almost become more resilient, to build your confidence. So actually, are we ever going to become confident? Because we should be putting ourselves, and we're actually building our resilience rather than and it's given me a lot of food for thought, obviously thinking about that in a lot more detail. But I like the analogy of, like, right, okay, I know I wanted to push myself, go into different, like, industry sectors, different roles, and, you know, obviously not remaining comfortable in our, you know, our comfort zone, and pushing ourselves, and how it's grown in terms of your confidence. That's, you know, that's a really different and interesting take on it. So thank you for sharing on that.
No problem.
So talking about confidence, it's not a destination, it's going to be a journey that's continuous. Just coming back to you, Lindsay, what steps are you putting into place to support what you want to achieve around maybe confidence, or how confidence can support your overall career goals?
Well, I think, Becky, I couldn't agree more with that analogy. It's certainly a journey, but one I'm really starting to embrace now. So a big change for me when returning was reducing my hours. As a mum of two, a main focus for me was having that great work-life balance. So I was happy at home and happy at work. So it was really important. But for me, that was really good from day one, as I had something practical as a goal to kind of focus on straight away. So this meant I needed to be very open and clear with the team around me to say what I can, what I can't commit to each week, and learning, which I would always see as a weakness before, and saying no, that I can't help, because I would have always bent over backwards to try and help. But actually starting to review my priorities more regularly, so that it was more of an open and honest conversation within the team about making sure that I was doing the valuable work. And I think I started to focus on my purpose in the team. So that's something I acknowledged that was kind of slipping. I wanted to stop that self-doubt cycle. So something I got anxiety from when I first come back was meeting new people. So the company had grown so much during the pandemic as well. We were in a fortunate position. I tried to flip that meeting new people and that anxiety onto its head, focusing back on my purpose, meaning that I could, using the meet and greets that were kind of a usual way of getting to know everybody remotely as well, it was an opportunity for me to really share my experience at AO the 4 years prior to my 9 months of maternity leave, and start to share with them what I can be a go-to person for certain subjects, because that was what was important to me. It meant that new feeling started to fade a little bit more, and having that confidence that expert inside me was there. It just needed a little help to get out. So having achieved my work-life balance goal, which I do feel like I regularly have to keep a check on, and to be fair, my team do as well, which is fantastic. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. So what was next for me? The goal setting seemed to work. So through my one-to-one conversations, it felt that I needed that next level. So what was it? And it was line management. And I've been really privileged to have that opportunity given to me earlier this year. And it felt that supporting colleague journeys into AO was quite relatable through the returning to work journey. So I'll probably summarise that being part of the Confidence Collective has kind of inspired me, which is why I'd say I am embracing that now and trying to kind of face up to those confidence demons. But it's not just on my own, it's with the wonderful people as well, and giving me these opportunities to get out of my comfort zone.
Brilliant, Lindsay. And I've got to say, I love you when you quoted yourself as an expert there. That's just amazing. We talk about in terms of the sessions around we are experts, because we if you look at the definition of expert in the dictionary, we all are experts. So thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. And then just finally, just coming back to yourself, Laura, obviously, you know, you've had that experience of returning to work, and other people might be going through that same sort of journey for various reasons over the next few months. What would be your learnings from that, and any advice that you could give to people that might be, you know, lacking a bit of confidence, a bit hesitant, you know, maybe changing industries, etc.? Have you got any advice based on your own experiences?
Yeah, I mean, one of my values, another one of them, is about building relationships. And I think going back and not being able to just chat at the tea point or speak to the person next to you at the desk was really daunting. And I think I can't even imagine what it's like going into a brand new company where you don't even know anyone and it's all like over a screen. But for me, I would say, you know, just reach out to people, just book in random chats. Like, it might seem really strange at the time just to book in with a random person you've never spoken to before. But one thing that I always say to my husband is, how many chats do you have with your team? Like, how many catch-ups do you have? And he's like, catch-ups? I don't do that, I just do meetings. And I think, but in the office, you would definitely have stopped and just had a chat with someone about something so random and just got to know them. So why aren't you doing that over Teams and video and whatever? And yeah, he just laughs at me when I say things like this. But I think it's really important, like, to speak to people. You're alone so much in your house all day compared to what you would have been like in the office. So probably the biggest tip, and it'll build your confidence because you're building relationships, you're talking to people, you're getting yourself out there, you're doing a bit of self-promotion as well. Just book in with someone random tomorrow and see how it makes you feel at the end of it. Be a bit courageous, challenge yourself, but yeah, just keep reaching out to people.
I love that. So we should be all reaching out to somebody we don't know tomorrow and having a chat with them, because you not only makes you feel great and builds your confidence, just think about the impact that it has on them as well. It'll be absolutely amazing. So if anyone does it, report back to us on the meetup. Like to see how that goes. That's brilliant. Well, thank you to our panelists. We have got time for a couple of questions. One's actually already come in on the chat, and then I'll see if anyone else has got a question. So this is from your point. I know I probed into it a bit more, Cass, but James is interested in understanding the thoughts about not feeling until entering the IT world. Is it something that people in IT can do or not do that might feel you don't feel less of those imposter syndrome feelings?
I think now that the world of IT has changed a lot. We're a lot more normal about being geeky. I think when I started back in IT, the level of geek was something totally different. So you didn't get that chance to collaborate as much. We were kind of a new generation back then. We often got told off by our line manager for going outside. We'd start off with having a coffee, and by the end of it, the whole team would be out there, but we wouldn't be talking about last night's TV. We'd be talking about whatever we were stuck on and working through it, away from the desk, away from the actual code, everything. We'd just be talking about that problem. So I think that's something that we've really would encourage in every level now, is to collaborate more and more, and don't be afraid of the geekiness of getting that book out and saying, I think I've seen that somewhere in one of my old textbooks or something. I still do it now, from when I did my BA qualifications all those years ago. I still get my book out and say, I'm sure I've seen that somewhere. Let's just have a little refresh. Don't be afraid to do that. And definitely, if anybody's going home and thinking, I need to quit my job because I can't do it, that you need to reach out and have a chat, because you can do it. And there's somebody else that's probably having exactly the same problem, or will be able to say, I did that last week. Let's have a look at it like this. Just, yeah, it goes back to what Jennifer said earlier on about the power of vulnerability, and vulnerability is just so closely linked to courage. So yeah, totally agree with all what you said there, Cass. So thank you. Jennifer, you got a question?
Well, I've actually got a question for each of the panelists, because they shouldn't be left off the hook. And then I've also got one more question for the panelists plus Louise and Katie overall. So should I just start rattling these off, or how should we? Okay. Well, we'll start with Cheryl. Cheryl, through the first round of the panel, you mentioned working with your imposter syndrome. For you, what does that look and feel like?
Yeah, good question. So I'm such a doubter. I doubt myself so much, to the point where I'll get frustrated that someone's saying I'm doing a good job and I don't believe it. The whole feeling around not deserving to be there, that feeling is real strong for me. Time and time again, my boyfriend said, you're good at your job, you're good at what you do, why do you doubt it? And I think, I don't know, there's something in my mind to keep telling me that I'm not good at it, which is why I really focus on the changing the thoughts and trying to reframe that and say I am. It's hard. I don't think I've got it right, and I don't think I will get it to the point that I've absolutely accomplished it. But I think that's the biggest thing for me, just feeling like I'm not doing a good enough job.
And so you've worked with it though, as far as like trying to counter it and that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. For Cass, actually, you sort of kind of answered the question already in the dialogue between you and Becky, but I'm going to reiterate it again because it kind of stuck out to me when you said it. And that's, you were describing coming into a room where everybody else is at this level and you're at this level and that sort of thing. So what do you think generates that perception of you being here and everyone else there? Or do you have anything more that you want to add to that after the dialogue that you had with Becky on the subject?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely goes hand in hand with the negative self-talk. It's very much an up there perception. I don't think I walk into a room and everybody looks at me and goes, get out. Not since I was at school anyway. I think it's definitely something that's an internal thought, but I think a lot of people think that, to be honest. And how do you manage it? I mean, a lot of people have seen the ring that I wear. It says that I am enough, so I do often look at that during the day and remind myself that I can do it. That was something that's for lots of different reasons. So yeah, I think that's probably a big reminder to yourselves. You are enough, you are good enough. If you weren't meant to be there, then something would have come up and moved you in a different direction. And because I do believe a lot of in fate, and you are where you are at the right time it's meant to be. So I think just a little bit more self-belief.
No, I like the idea of that ring too. I might get myself one. So for Lindsay, what struck me in your first piece with the panel and everything was about how you kind of have like mom think, and then you've got work think, and these are separate places in your mind, never should they cross, and all that fun stuff. So for a mom returning to work, looking to kind of shorten that relearning curve for getting back into work think, do you have any tips or ideas there?
For me, a piece of advice I'd share around, I think it's around that way of thinking will kind of switching that nervousness around. I've not exercised that part of the brain, which is what I mentioned. For me, it was around minimizing that feeling of being you. So what really helped me was creating that network before I actually returned back to work. So I stayed in touch with colleagues, with friends that worked for AO, and kept that open dialogue, whether it be talking about my family, friends, but also reaching out to understand the changes that were happening around the business. So I stayed in touch, meaning that it didn't necessarily feel like I've got loads to catch up on. It reduced that for me, and that fear of I'm going into somewhere that's completely new. So I would say that was really key for me, just to make sure that I'd already got a network. So when I joined, I also started, like Laura returned back a few months before me. So already we connected, and we kind of looped in straight away to say, about how are you managing your work-life balance? How are you doing this? And we shared tips between ourselves as well. So don't feel alone in the situation. There are other people returning to work from a long break for different reasons, and it's the same struggle.
It is, absolutely. Thank you for that. Laura, you love to be a planner. It's where you build your confidence from, and inevitably life happens and change happens. When change is sudden, how do you cope with that?
Not so well. I'm only joking. You've got to plan for change as well, haven't you, in a way? So you've got your little backup ideas and things like that. So when change happens, you just plan for that next bit of change. So as an example, and it's outside of work, I've had it before, kind of like through COVID, with planning to go on one holiday and suddenly it gets cancelled and you've got to get another one. I'm that weird person who looks at every single review on a website, and if it's got one bad review, I'm like, no, we're not going. So I'll put that effort back in. I'll refine somewhere and put all that same plan, behind it. But yeah, change does happen, and I do embrace it. I'm not saying that I'm only like stay on the path of just things going well, but you've always got to have a backup plan. You've always got to plan that something's going to go wrong. And working on a project at the minute with a third-party client, and I think we're up to plan C or plan D. Matt Rooney's on the call, he'll be nodding away. But it's how you adapt to that, and how you make sure that, as a project manager, how are my developers okay with that change? Has everyone got the requirements through, the BA supporters, that they can get what they need for it? So like I said, you always expect something not to fully go well within a plan, with any plan. But if you have a backup plan, you're usually okay.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And finally, for all of our panelists, including our presenters, Louise and Katie, question for all of you guys, so gals, I should say. Anyhow, so your Confidence Collective journey is about to come to an end. How are you going to sustain your confidence moving forward?
I want to stay involved in things like this, to do more, putting myself out there on talks, keep supporting Becky in what she's doing, and being an advocate for the courses that she's running, because it's really, really helped.
Yeah, I think practice, and keep on practicing it, and just don't let that, practice makes perfect, but I think it'll always be practicing it to get it to perfect.
It's a great question, Jen, because it's something that came up after the back of the third one. I think the third one, where we talked around making ourselves a little bit famous. So it was the one where we started to think about panel talks and video clips and things like that. And we've got the most value out of it. And I think we came out of this going, oh my goodness, it's going to be the fourth one. It's the last one. Do we start thinking about how we regroup after this? I know we'll always form part of the wider collective as well, but I think we've really formed a strong bond. So I think it's something we'd love to tackle together and try and make it continue as much as we can.
Oh, thank you. Katie, Laura, do you want to pick up anything before I move on?
I was trying to think then as everyone else was talking. The one thing that I've learned over the past year, and it sounds so simple, is to talk. So I find talking so difficult. Like I just don't talk about my feelings at all. And that person that will bottle them up and then have a meltdown and cry all over you. But the one thing that it keeps surprising me, I don't know why it keeps surprising me, but that talking does help. So talking with my manager, that's how I ended up moving teams, and that made a massive difference. There was one of the BAs who I was talking to, and I remember I was joking because we were like, oh yeah, they always say what's the best part of your week, and I'm like, yeah, it's that 1 hour on Monday at 9 o'clock. And I'm like, that shouldn't be the thing that I can point out my week. But talking to him, he was in the exact same position, so straight away I wasn't on my own. So then that takes away that feeling of it's just me. And I think that is the one thing that has really helped. And it continues to be hard, even though I've got proof that it helps. But yeah, that I would say that's the one thing.
Laura Louise, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think for me, at the very start of the course, you ask the question, where are you now and where do you want to get to? And that really stuck with me. I don't think I'd really thought about my goals and aspirations as much as I did with this course. And I think that question will always stick with me. Every year I'm going to reassess it. Where am I now? And where am I going to get to? Where do I want to get to? And then create some values around that. So like I said, what's giving me that buzz? What's making me proud? What's making me happy? And that will help me create that journey. So it's never going to leave me, this. And like the rest of the girls were saying, I definitely want to be part of any of the other things that are happening, future talks. I want to attend them, and I want to just keep my toes in. But I'll definitely be reassessing where I am today and where I need to get to.
Louise, anything to add before?
Yes. No, I'm muted. I think for me, it's going to be embracing that bit of me that signs up for things without thinking about it, and instead of seeing it as a flaw, see it as something that's good, and just going for it, and then worrying about it later.
Brilliant, fantastic, thank you. I did say last one, but I had a message someone asking if they could ask a question. So Ellie, are you there? Would you like to ask a question?
Hi. Yeah, so I just wondered if any of you, particularly the people who like to cling back to a certificate or a big list of facts, if you've got any advice or insight on trusting your instinct and sticking by it, even if you've not got evidence to go with it.
Any advice on what to do with that instinct?
Yeah, because I mean, I typically will, and if I have a certificate or if I have really well recorded set of evidence, I will fight to the death. But if that little chink of doubt shows, I think, is my instinct right, or is this person who speaks with greater confidence than me right? And I think you'll often find that your instinct is right. And
I was just going to say that your instinct is probably a real little gut feeling that you should probably always listen to. I can't think of any times when, for me personally, where instinct has not helped. At that moment in time, it's been the right thing to do. There might be hindsight and different things that I've learned since then that I'd be like, oh, if I'd have known then what I know now. But at that moment in time, it's been the right thing to do. So if you're thinking that maybe you're not getting told the full information when you're trying to get some requirements, for example, there's nothing wrong with just reaching out in a few different areas and saying and validating that. And in validating that, you're validating yourself a little bit as well. So don't put the doubt there, just reach out in different little ways, but follow your instinct, I would say always.
I'd say as well, particularly within tech, I know I was like, I want a certificate. But apart from that one certificate, which isn't even in business analysis, let's face it, I did 12 months of mentoring, and someone asked me the other day, oh, what books shall I read? And I was like, actually, I didn't read a book in that whole 12 months. I literally spent probably 20 hours with someone. But when you look across the whole tech kind of world, especially at AO, it might not be the same elsewhere, but within AO, within the BAs, we have got a mentoring scheme. So we're bringing BAs in that haven't got it. The PMs, I know there's PMs that haven't got any qualifications. Even developers, so many developers that we work with that are self-taught. And I trust them as a BA that doesn't know anything about developing. I trust the ones that are self-taught as much as the ones that aren't. And I couldn't, if you put them in a lineup in front of me, I wouldn't tell you which ones had done it or not. And probably a bit cheesy, but I remember reading something about Obama, and he said if he's got a decision to make, if he's even just 51% more certain on one option than the other, it's 51%, so you've got to go with it because you've not got time to deliberate over them small things. When he's like, obviously he's the president, was the president, but I think that same sentiment applies. At one point you've just got to go for it.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you. Great question as well. Really, really good question. Something that, you know, I hear that crops up a lot. So thank you so much for asking that. Brilliant. Thank you to our fantastic panelists. What a great conversation. Hope you agree. We've got so much out of that. So thank you. And thank you for the great questions. So we're going to move on to our final lightning talk. So we have Zoe for our final lightning talk. If you could unmute yourself. So are you sharing some slides?
Yeah, so no, I've not got any slides this time. So being a designer, I'm always sharing my screen and going through stuff with clients. So I thought I'd just go for it this time.
Oh, brilliant. Over to you, Zoe. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to kind of open up and become a bit more vulnerable in this talk because I want to share my journey of becoming a confident introvert. So just to touch on introverts in general, introverts are usually defined as a quiet, reserved individual, and they like their own space and having their own time and being able to think and reflect on their own, if that makes sense. So it's known for introverts to prefer minimal stimulating environments and not big crowds, and like talking to people just one-to-one, and feel more comfortable doing that. And then it can even come back to things like prefer writing or sending emails rather than a phone call. So just bits like that, which ties into the personality of an introvert themselves. So on the other hand, we have extroverts. So these are more louder people, more outgoing. They love socializing in big groups, and they kind of gain energy from group situations, whereas an introvert may need time to recharge after that. It like drains energy out of an introvert, if that makes sense. So there's also, if you think of it as kind of a scale of introverts and extroverts, there's also people that may sit in the middle of that, say if their personality trait is kind of a bit of both, if that makes sense. And they're called, kind of remember the word now. One second. Yeah, ambivert. Sorry, it's a bit crazy, isn't it? Lots of different terms for it. So if someone has traits of both sides, they're classed as an ambivert. So I'd say I'm definitely on the introvert end of the scale, and I'll just share why now. So I'm just going to rewind quite a bit back. I'm going to go into quite a bit of detail, but I'm hoping that some people will relate to that, and it will have an impact on you of where I was in the past and where I've come to at this point in my career right now. So going back to younger school years, so I was always really quiet growing up. And I was that kid in school that didn't speak much, but I was happy. I wasn't sad. And I realized once I got older that there's a lot of misconceptions of being quiet. Firstly, I was always asked if I was okay or if I was upset, or why I didn't talk much. And then when I did pluck up the courage to talk, I'd then get comments like, "Oh my God, she can talk," or "That's the first time I've heard you say anything." So it's kind of tough when you're quiet and you get comments like that, because that's just you naturally. And then you don't want to change yourself because that's not you being true to yourself. So to this day, I still believe that there's kind of some situations where if you are quieter than say like louder people, that you can miss out on opportunities, and you kind of not get forgotten, but you don't come to mind if someone wants someone to do a talk, or if I'll just go back to school again, like plays and stuff. If you're a quiet child, then you don't really get offered like a main role in a play. And obviously back in the day I would have said no anyway, but that's not the point. So yeah, just moving on to starting high school and stuff. So I did have quite a big, large group of friends, but I was always the quiet one in the group, and I'd let other people do the talking, and I'd just chip in where I felt comfortable. And just to share a little funny story, which I remember to this day, is I started volunteering in high school to go into primary schools and talk to younger children about high school experiences and stuff like that. And I remember me being me back then. I just wanted to introduce myself quick, and then hopefully the next person would start talking, and there wasn't a break. So me rushing my words out, said what my name was, and then I had loads of little kids going, "I can't hear you. What are you saying? Can't hear you." And me being me, just back down. And I was like, what am I doing here? I shouldn't have done this. Like, that was my first time going to speak somewhere. So from there, moving into college, again, I was really quiet, and I was like kind of in my own shell, if that makes sense. And again, I'd get people asking if I was okay. So I started to kind of try and push myself out of my comfort zone by joining a choir in college. So I can't sing. I don't think I can sing, but it was just something to be involved in. And obviously doing shows and stuff, pushing myself out there to be centre of attention, if that makes sense, which I've always hated. So yeah, I started slowly coming out of my shell, and then leaving college and career-wise, I was always interested in IT. So I started an apprenticeship in software development. And while I was doing that, I realised that it wasn't coding that I was into, it was more design. I was more interested in how applications looked and how the user would use them rather than how they were built in the back end. So I've found a real passion in design, specifically application design and web design. So from there on, I realised I had a dream, but then there was always me being quiet that was still holding me back from that. And I always thought I'll never be able to present because I can't talk in front of people. I'll never be able to go out to meetings and visit customers or anything like that. So it was kind of like a burden on me that I know I want to do it, but I don't think I can do it. So from there, I started joining meetings and stuff, but I'd be take a back seat in the meetings, and I'd let other people do the talking, and I'd just agree, and I didn't want anyone having to just listen to me. So then a big transformational moment for me was when I started working at A&S Group as a product designer. So just a little insight into a story while I first started. I was on a big complex project and I was a bit overwhelmed with it. There was like a lot of stress involved because it was one of my first big projects. And instead of me being me, staying quiet, I decided to reach out to a colleague. Actually had a phone call, surprising, instead of just sending an email. And we had a chat around what I was struggling with and how I didn't feel like I should have been working on that project, like I weren't ready for it and stuff. And he proper pushed me and motivated me to believe that I should be doing it. So I think having that person that believes in you proper spurs you on and makes you want to strive to achieve more. If someone else believes in you, you think, well, they must see something in me, so I'm going to try. So anyway, he mentioned that there's going to be a meeting with the clients and he wants me to present in the meeting. And I was thinking, no way, I'm not doing that. There's no chance. And he said, you should do it. It'll be good for your career. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. I'll pick it up again and we'll work through it. So I committed to it. As soon as I committed, I decided I didn't want to do it. I was like, no chance. But anyway, I went with it. I put a lot of prep in. So I had my iPad full of my notes, everything to go through. And then I sat back afterwards and thought, oh no, all the attention's going to be on me for the whole meeting. I really can't do it. So that evening I did a dummy run with my boyfriend and I couldn't get any of my words out. I couldn't explain how I wanted to in the meeting. And I went into panic mode and I was tempted to email and say, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to back out. In the end, I didn't. And I thought, just do it. Just push yourself. So that morning, I was that nervous. I was actually sick because it was my first proper meeting. And I was thinking, wow, why am I doing this? So yeah, I went into the meeting. It was a big boardroom. Bear in mind, it was my first meeting. All the clients came in suits. They looked really professional, really high up in the business. I'm sure there was a CEO there as well. And I was just thinking, oh no. So anyway, the meeting started and I just decided to ignore everyone in the room, pretend I was on my own, thought about what the actual project was. And I knew the project inside out because I was the one that designed it. So I thought no one knows if I'm wrong because it's my work, if that makes sense. So I went for it. And as soon as I started talking, I got in the zone and the passion took over. And because I love my job that much, once I start talking about it, then you can't stop me. So I just went on and on. And the meeting actually ran over, but the clients wanted me to carry on because they were that interested in what I was talking about. So afterwards, I was inundated with emails of praise, which was quite surprising for me because I hadn't done anything like that before. And from that moment on, I realised that I am capable of doing it. I just need to push myself out of my comfort zone more and just ignore that fear that was stopping me. So from there on, I realised that confidence is a process. It's not something that will happen overnight. You just got to keep working at it and keep pushing yourself to get there. And each meeting I did after that, it got easier each time and it became more natural to me. And then I made the decision to travel down to our London offices and deliver a presentation to the sales team. And, you know, salespeople are a tricky audience. So that proper pushed me. Instead of hiding behind my laptop, doing it over Teams, I was in person. So from there, I kind of felt more confident in myself that after I'd done a few more meetings, and I set myself the goal of becoming a senior product designer. So in the back of my head, I knew I could do it, but I just kept telling myself that I wasn't ready. And I had an amazing manager that pushed me, and they could see my potential, which helped me out so much as well. So in May last year, I was promoted to senior product designer. And then after that, I took a step back and realised that I'd achieved so much in that amount of time from where I used to be to where I was after that promotion. And the transformation in my confidence was crazy over that time as well. So after getting my promotion, I thought, what's next for me? what can I do from here to improve my confidence even more and take another step? So in March, I signed up for the Confidence Collective, which is the 4-part program all around confidence. And that's had such a massive impact on my confidence personally over the past 3 months. And I've learned to analyse myself, which is really insightful, and work out what my values and strengths are and where I struggle, what I can improve on. And that's allowed me to set myself new goals that I wouldn't have done otherwise. So during them sessions, I also delivered my first short talk, which I could never imagine myself doing a couple of years ago. And I managed to post it on LinkedIn to try and push myself out there a bit. And of course, I'd wrote my post, it was all ready, and I was sat there for about 10 minutes before I actually hit post. But it was crazy how much feedback I got from that. And that's really made me believe in myself more, seeing what other people thought about it as well. So during that process of getting from this really quiet, shy young girl into this more, I'm going to say expert in my job, I now have the ambition to set even further goals, which obviously back then were just a complete no. I would have just said no straight away. So I have now the idea of mentoring younger people who may not realise the different creative careers that are out there, and highlight that anything's possible if you're passionate about something. Doesn't matter how quiet you are, and don't let that get in the way of you doing what you want to do. And I also want to start a video series of design insights. So I'm going to do like 10-minute videos. So they've been approved with work. I just need to plan them out now. And I'm also going to push them out online as well to reach more people. So just a few tips if anyone is struggling with anything that I have done, or is just naturally quiet and you want to try and improve on that, then don't think of introversion as something that needs to be cured. To me, it's now a gift because I've learned from it and I've made that big step to kind of overcome it. And I'm proud of who I am and my personality traits. Don't try and become an extrovert. Just be who you are and find what you're passionate about, and then that will push you on even further. And again, confidence is a process, so just trust it and keep going and keep pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, no matter how hard it is. And the results will amaze you if you do that. So yeah, just set yourself micro goals, which will ultimately lead onto you achieving your bigger goal. And yeah, just try and understand yourself a bit more, what your values are, what your strengths, what you can improve on. And don't let being an introvert cause barriers in your career. So I'm an introvert, but I'm now a confident one. Thank you.
That's absolutely amazing. Such an inspiring, insightful story. It just blew me away, Zoe. Absolutely blew me away. Just lost for words a little bit. It was just so gripping in terms of wanting to know more about your journey. Really taken back, to be honest with you. So a couple of questions already come in, Zoe. You talked about, obviously, about the introversion and extroversion. And Rebecca has asked, what tips do you have for the extroverts out there, and how can we support introverts?
That's a good one. I'd say maybe just try and involve people a bit more if they are quieter. Try and prompt them. If they're not talking much, or if they seem quiet, or they're struggling with something, or how to put themselves out there, try and prompt them or involve them in more things maybe, just to make them feel like people understand where they're coming from, if that makes sense, and make them more comfortable in pushing themselves out of the comfort zone.
Brilliant. Great advice there, Zoe. Thank you. Jennifer?
Hi, thanks. I had asked that sustaining question thinking that all the speakers had already gone, Zoe, and
oh no, it's fine, don't worry.
To include you too, and so yeah, my apologies there. You do have that question eventually, but the question I want to ask first is introverts, tend to, of course, get overlooked for promotions or, rewards, raises, all that business. And you were fortunate enough to have a manager who kind of, go ahead, put yourself out there, gave you the encouragement. So for somebody who may not have a manager who's as encouraging, what tips would you have for them?
Just believe in yourself completely. Don't let anything get in the way. And even just speaking to friends about career stuff, if you don't usually have them conversations, and getting feedback off people is a massive thing, I think. The more feedback you get, the more you learn, even if it is negative feedback. Take it with a pinch of salt and move on from it in a positive way, and learn from anything that didn't go too well, if that makes sense.
And then what are you going to do to sustain yourself now that you've come to the end of this Confidence Collective journey?
Yeah, that's a good one. So like I mentioned, I want to push myself to do mentoring with younger children, which I've had a vision of doing that for a while. So I just want to plan out what I'm going to do. And I'm thinking of maybe kind of, this is going to be a future one. I'm not putting it off, but maybe doing workshops about design, like have an idea around design with me, and like doing workshops with young people of how to design an application. And then also I want to do more public speaking as well. So I did my first little talk at the Confidence community, and I want to kind of elaborate more on that, go into more detail around design itself, because there's lots of things that people aren't aware of. There's lots of finer details. It's not just making something look pretty. There's a lot of stuff that goes in the background around the user experience, accessibility, branding, etc. So just give people more of an insight into it.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you so much again. Speakers, panelists, make sure before you sign off, you've all got your screenshots of the comments that have come in terms of obviously the insights, so you can all put them in your recognition, your personal development Trello boards, whatever you're going to set up going forward, because you should be so immensely proud of yourselves. You push yourselves, and we all know in terms of the chats on the WhatsApp around, nerves and apprehension, but you've all done it. You've all massively done it, and you should be immensely proud of yourselves, and just spend a few minutes reflecting on that as we finish, because it's no mean feat. And, in terms of people all sat here, it's you that's actually put yourselves out there and actually talked and shown a lot of vulnerability, which is not easy to do as well. So you should be so proud. I really, really enjoyed this evening. Apologies we have overrun, but I think we all can take a lot away from the session. It was definitely worth listening to everybody's advice and staying on a little bit longer. So apologies, has gone a little bit over. I hope everyone's found it really interesting. In terms of your feedback, if you want to share some feedback, either pop it in the chat, pop it on the meetup group. If it has been your first session at Women in Tech North, we are doing events once a month now. Hopefully in the not so distant future, we might hopefully get together in person again. So we look forward to that. But in the meantime, next couple of weeks we'll be announcing the next meetup that we'll have next month. But thank you so much again. Thank you for everyone who's attended. Thank you for the fantastic feedback, the comments, and have a lovely rest of the evening. Well done to everyone again. See you later, everyone.